November 19th, 2024. Well, it looks like that Biden has probably finally made the decision to allow the Ukrainians to use the U.S. ATACMS missiles for strikes inside of the internationally recognized territory of Russia. So that's a development that's kind of been breaking in the last day or two here, and we're still trying to get a clear handle on exactly what this actually means, because at this point it's unclear whether or not this is a complete release to strike all available targets, or as it seems like most of the reports suggest that the main focus will be on the battle in the Kursk region, and there could be some specific tactical reasons for this decision at this time, which I'll kind of get into here. These missiles potentially have ranges up to 190 miles, but apparently it requires the interaction of U.S. personnel to effectively employ these weapons. And this is why this has been considered by at least the Russians to be an escalation of the conflict. While the motivation for this is being attributed to the deployment of something on the order of 10,000 allegedly North Korean troops into the Kursk region to fight against the Ukrainians, there hasn't been a whole lot of confirmation that the Ukrainians have, that the North Koreans have actually entered conflict yet. So that status is also a little bit murky. So anyway, that's sort of where we are. I'll kind of go into this a little bit here now. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like. I'm looking for more subscriptions as always, and of course you can click the bell for notifications, or you can follow me on Rumble. So, the information is in the description below on that. Okay, so essentially the situation right now in Ukraine war is that effectively some of the most elite units of the Ukrainian army have pushed into a narrow pocket south of into the Kursk Oblast of Russia, south of the city of Kursk, significantly south of it actually, and have been in a set of stalemate for some time. I guess the Russians have finally assembled a pretty large force of something like 50,000 troops to oppose this force, and of course there's been a lot of attacks with drones and tactical aircraft, these glide bombs that they keep talking about. So on the Ukrainian forces. Some of the Russian offensives have, I think there've been a few of them that have pushed them back somewhat, and at least the latest one allegedly was met with pretty fierce Ukrainian counter punches. However, it looks like a significant pocket of Ukrainians, I'm not sure how significant, have been isolated from the main body and has been surrounded by the Russians. So that's sort of the situation that we have in that region. And so one reason that, as I said, that this may be kind of a tactical thing is that by using these strike weapons to attack Russian ammo dumps and supply lines and other facilities further into the Russian territory, they may basically reduce the logistics and inhibit the ability of the Russians to counterattack this pocket. And because the Russians are kind of in the process of counterattacking right at this time, that may be the reason that authorization has been made. And we'll see how much actual effect this has. I mean, one thing, if the strikes are not too deep, with the range of these missiles, they could be fired from a significant distance inside of Ukraine into the targets that are somewhat more or less narrow into there. So the Ukrainians have lost a fair number of HIMARS systems apparently in this battle that they've had since last August, and because they've moved them forward, and so you could attack targets with the ATACMS from further back and perhaps not expose them to counterfire as much as you would with the HIMARS. That's one thing. This also has a more powerful warhead, which is another aspect. And of course, you could use them to strike deeper. Suppose the Russians have actually moved most of their tactical aircraft outside of HIMARS range, so they won't be able to do a whole lot of attacks. And remember, the Ukrainians have been doing a lot of deep strikes into Russia on with their own drones that they've been creating with small mini airplanes, basically remotely controlled and loaded with explosives, including apparently one fairly successful attack on an ammo dump that was fairly large, for instance, a couple of months ago. So this may not be that big of a game changer. It's also unclear just exactly how many HIMARS missiles that the Ukrainians have. One argument might be that it's maybe around 100, perhaps. I don't know. Because somebody suggested there may be about a million. They're fairly expensive missiles, and they've been out of production in the U.S. We're trying to make some new ones, but essentially we have a limited supply, and we don't want to. We need them for our own purposes if we get into certain other scenarios, of course. So that's one reason why I think there's been a reluctance to provide them. There's also the Russian threats of some counter move probably has some impact, although we're unclear what that will actually consist of. And one possibility would be to bring more North Korean troops into the conflict, I guess. It's hard to know. The 10,000 troops, again, it's unclear whether they're really in combat or whether they're maybe just handling secondary missions, or maybe some sort of doing the same kind of jobs that some of the territorial defense units do in the Ukrainian military. These probably are not shock troops, in other words, if you want to look at it that way. So, all right, that's going on, and that we'll have to see where that goes to. Now, throughout the rest of the conflict, pretty much the Russians have been on the offensive just about all over the place. They've been having a fair amount of success. I would say the one area where they've had some real trouble is a place called Tourette's. And if I'm pronouncing it right, it's somewhere in the middle of the Eastern Front. And this city, the geography of it seems to favor the Ukrainian defenders pretty much. And the Ukrainians have even used this to their advantage to launch counterattacks, which have occasionally thrown the Russians back. So that's a bit of a seesaw battle, but elsewhere, the Russians have pretty much been advancing. In Kuprin's region, Chasiv down, they're closing in on Pokrovsk, and then further in the south, after they took Volodar, they've moved, or I pronounced that north from there. They're also trying to conduct offensives down in the Zaporizhia region. So. And there's some places where it looks like Russian units are about to either be encircled or put into kind of a fire cauldron of artillery and drones and so forth. So making it very difficult to retreat without taking heavy casualties and impossible to ultimately hold. So we'll see what the introduction of these missiles in the presumably not that great of quantities will actually do. That it will probably force the Russians to spread their logistical sites out somewhat, and that seems to be it. Although the main thing seems to be that the Russian manpower resources are just falling down. You continually have these discussions of the relative losses on the part of the Russians and Ukrainians, and the Western media continually tries to make it look as if the Ukrainians are really winning, but really they're actually losing, I think. And we'll see, what this does. I noticed that Donald Trump Jr. made some negative comments about this today, along with MTG, of course. But I don't think anybody pays a lot about attention to what she says. Sorry, MTG, but I mean, really. But the Donald Trump Jr. comments could be reflecting his father's opinion, or they might not be. It might be just his own. If this is just a limited use and a limited number of missiles, it probably won't lead to any really massive Russian response, probably. And so probably business as usual will probably continue, but we'll have to wait and see what the significance of it is. I mean, certainly these missiles have been used against Russian targets in Crimea and have done some damage, but it certainly hasn't driven the Russians out of Crimea or anything of that sort. So, that's kind of about it. So we'll have to see, is this also possibly an attempt by the Biden administration to sort of escalate the conflict and try to effectively maybe tie Trump's hands on any diplomacy he might want to engage in after the election, after the inauguration, excuse me. That's another possibility that's been raised. I tend to think it's more of an operational thing. That certainly one source suggests that Ukraine really wants to extricate their units from the cursed region and to minimize their casualties. And they're worried that if they just pull out, the Russians will follow them on into Ukraine proper and head towards Sumy. And so that's the Sunni region. So that's another consideration. So anyway, that's kind of the state of the conflict. We'll see, what would be the outcome here. The other issue I want to briefly, I noticed that the Democrats are still involved in an attempt to take the Senate race in Pennsylvania, and they're basically flagrantly were ignoring the state Supreme Court orders on how they should follow the state laws about legitimate ballots and ones that are not proper. And so anyhow, the Supreme Court there, as a state Supreme Court, which is a predominant Democrat Supreme Court, has ruled again that they need to only count the legitimate ballots and not these ones that don't have the proper signatures and so forth. So we'll see what that amounts to ultimately. On the House races at the present time, it's looking pretty bad for the Republicans in California. 45. As of the last time I looked, we're now falling behind by I think 36 votes. But there's been a steady increase in the Democrat vote as they slowly count the ballots. I don't know why it's so slow. We know they were supposed to all be in by last Tuesday, so you would think that they could have all been counted by now, and maybe they have been. But this always raises suspicions. Otherwise, other races are tight, but it's looking. I would tend to think that probably Alaska will go Republican, and the 13th district in California. So far, it looks like the Republicans are holding by about 2,000 votes. And there's a tight race in Iowa, which will probably head to a recount, but Republican is at least ahead there. So there's a fair chance the Republicans will probably end up with maybe 221 seats, and the Democrats will get the rest. I guess that would be 214. I guess I think that's right. So anyhow, so that's the way it's looking right now. There's still some chance maybe the recount on California 45 could go our way, but I wouldn't bet on it. So anyway, that's about the way I see it for now. We'll have to see how things go out with these cabinet appointments. I know the Gates appointment has created a lot of controversy, and we'll see what really the real lowdown is and what impact that actually has. So all for this time. I'll be, of course, post this as always on YouTube, here on YouTube and on Rumble both, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below. So all for this time.